Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second plenary that we have during the Congress this week. So we have one today, we had one yesterday, and we'll have another one tomorrow.
Yeah.
And this particular plenary is focusing on embracing the digital transformation and technological development. So that's the main focus of today's plenary. We're going to have three presentations by three interesting presenters, and I think they're going to have some interesting things to share with us today. And then it's your opportunity for whatever time is left in the session to ask questions that you have of our presenters. And I'll give you a little bit more guidance at that time. So I'd like to begin by introducing our first speaker today. Sergio Cordova he's the founder and chairman of the Public Foundation, and he's also a permanent observer to the International Youth Organization for Ibero-America to the United Nations. So being in that position, that's quite an important position. I'm going to go off script. You have his bio in your information. I'm just going to say that Sergio is one of those people that connects people, he connects the dots, he looks for the opportunities, and he's able to bring those people and those capabilities together. He's quite good at that. So I think you're going to hear some interesting things from him this morning. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you, Sergio, please.
Great to see everyone here, and thank you so much, Tim, for that warm welcome. I just want to say it's an honor to be here at the second United Nations World Geospatial Information Congress. Thank you to the hosts, Government of India and its Ministry of Science and Technology, and thank you for our partners at the UNWGIC. I am Sergio Fernandez de Cordova, Executive Chairman of the Public Foundation. Public is an innovative foundation that mobilizes media, data, and technology for sustainable impact around the globe. We engage and connect change makers across public and private and nonprofit sectors and spark action around the Sustainable Development Goals.
That's fine.
Public was started 10 years ago with the theory that media, data, and technology are undervalued currencies, and that it was critical to utilize this media, data, and technology if we're going to look to create a Sustainable Development Goal platform, as well as we're going to look to create solutions, whether it's civil society, private sector, or government. And we built a foundation with the belief that with media, data, and technology, we could create that change and be that currency to help build on that tomorrow, today. For over a decade, we've been building global ecosystems, not only to give us unique access to technology and media and data assets, but also deep relationships with global leaders across various industries and platforms around the world. Our origins began when we started helping and amplifying the Barack Obama administration's working on their nonprofit and impact messages that were heard around the world. A few years later, we got involved in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and from there, we leveraged our relationships with actors and the UN system to begin hosting convenings, launching platforms, and helping advance the Sustainable Development Goals. And for the past 2 years, we've been focused heavily on programs that build off of cross-sector relationships that can expand our reach and create impact on the ground in countries around the world. And after 10 years, Public Foundation continues to focus as an organization for the people, generating impact around the globe and advancing the Sustainable Development Goals through media, data technology, and strategic convenings and partnerships to advance the goals. So I'm here representing the SDG Data Alliance. And the SDG Data Alliance, I'm going to show you a video, but it was really a conversation that began with the UN, GGIM group, ESRI, and ourselves when we were looking at the Sustainable Development Goals and looking at one of the most important pieces of the pie, which is data. How are we looking at measuring, creating baselines, and actually providing these resources and tools and technologies for government leaders to help advance the Sustainable Development Goals? So after many years of sort of mapping and bringing these pieces together, the SDG Data Alliance was created to bring GIS technology and capabilities to developing nations in order to accelerate the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. You need to be able to visualize and place your data so you know how and where to act and how to take action, how to implement change. We are leveraging multilateralism, geospatial frameworks, and leading geospatial technology and training to create a series of SDG data hubs across the world using the ArcGIS system from Esri. These hubs will help national leaders and communities better visualize and understand their data so they can take action on a range of sustainability and poverty issues, understand what the information is, and understand how to use this information, with the special focus this year has been around the SDG 10, reducing inequalities. So I'd like to show you a little video and wrap up my presentation with this video, give you a little bit of context of some of the work that the SDG Data Alliance has been doing around the world.
The SDG Data Alliance was launched in 2021 to bring geographic information systems, or GIS, technology and capabilities to developing nations in order to accelerate achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Using the power of purpose-driven collaboration, geospatial frameworks, and leading GIS technology and training, the SDG Data Alliance is creating a series of SDG data hubs that will help national leaders and communities better visualize and understand their data so they can take action on a range of sustainability and poverty issues, with a special focus on SDG 10, reducing inequalities. The SDG Data Alliance is a true multi-stakeholder partnership. The collaboration and support of each partner is what makes the work of the Alliance possible. Alliance partners include the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, Public Foundation, Esri, the United Nations Initiative on Global Geospatial Information Management, or UNWGIC, CHIA Network, and geospatial data leaders from country governments around the world. Public Foundation serves as the fund and program manager. Public's role is to oversee the funding, work with all Alliance partners, and manage the program, making sure that the Alliance is making progress in achieving its objectives. The W.K. Kellogg Foundation is a founding partner that provided initial financial resources to form the SDG Data Alliance. They also used their expertise and global network to support the initiative. The UNWGIC has created the Integrated Geospatial Information Framework, or IGIF, that provides the basis and guide for developing, integrating, strengthening, and maximizing geospatial information management in all countries that are part of the Alliance. Esri provides financial resources and access to the ArcGIS software that is essential to creating the SDG data hubs. Esri team members around the world work with local government partners to make sure they have the knowledge and resources needed to build SDG data hubs. CHIA Network is a financial supporter and partner that offers strategic advice on how to use blockchain technologies to advance the Alliance. The country partners are both collaborators and beneficiaries. They have been identified by the UNWGIC team and are working with the Alliance to advocate for GIS and the tracking of the SDGs within their own governments. They and their teams receive training, technology resources, and other support to complete the IGIF, create SDG data hubs, and engage with local stakeholders. In turn, they are creating a network and sharing knowledge and expertise with other Data Alliance countries. Creating the SDG data hubs is a four-step process: plan, assess, build, sustain, and grow. These steps are accomplished through the collaboration of all partners. The data hubs allow countries to visualize where they are in terms of sustainable development and where they should allocate their funding and resources to have the most impact. Online, the SDG Data Alliance can be found at sdg.org. The website is not only home to the SDG Data Alliance, but it is also filled with information and resources on how to leverage GIS and geospatial data for the SDGs. The SDG Data Alliance's technology, expertise, training, and financial support enables developing countries to more precisely allocate resources to achieve the SDGs and reduce inequalities. Our journey is just beginning. The SDG Data Alliance is a long-term partnership working throughout this decade of action to achieve the SDGs by 2030. If you are interested in becoming a partner, supporter, or finding other ways to get involved, visit sdg.org for more information.
Well, thank you, Sergio. And I'm sure that you're going to have lots of questions as we get into the question-answer period. So at that point, we'll pursue them. And you have no further comments at this time?
Not at all. Thank you,
Okay.
Tim.
All right. Thank you, Sergio. Okay, so we'll move to our second presentation. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Colin Lowe. He's the Chief Executive of the Singapore Land Authority. where his mission is to work on the land resources for the social and economic development of Singapore. He oversees the management of state land and properties, as well as the National Land Information Database. Obviously, some of his responsibilities clearly include the development of geospatial data, policies with regard to the geospatial data, as well as technologies to foster innovation. And that's really hoping to support the social and sustainability efforts of the government, the various enterprises, and the overall community within Singapore. So with that, Colin, please.
So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Colin. It's great to see so many people together in the same space, physically, finally, en masse. And if I may add, dancing as well. It's good to be back. And for myself, it's good to be back in Hyderabad. I've been here several times in the past in my previous job. And back then, what I know about Hyderabad is that it's famous for its high-tech city, the city of pearls, and in my very humble opinion, the best biryani. Hyderabadi biryani. I still remember having the biryani at Paradise Restaurant. That's some time back. But I do know now that Hyderabad is also the Geospatial Center for India. So I want to thank the organizer for inviting me to speak. Really honored and privileged to be invited as a speaker, sharing the stage with Sergio and Devlina. Again, my name is Colin, Chief Executive of Singapore Land Authority, or SLA in short. It is a government entity. There are three functions. First of all, SLA is the custodian of state properties across Singapore. And we optimize their use for economic, social, and community purposes. We are also the National Property Registration Authority. And lastly, the last function, SL, is the Geospatial Agency of Singapore, and which is the focus of today. You know, India has a special place in my heart. Between 2005 to 2008, for about 3.5 years, I was working for a hospitality company in charge of business development and investment for India. Based out of Singapore, but traveled fairly extensively across India. And together with my Indian joint venture partner, we will be on the roads for hours, looking at sites, locations that are suitable for hospitality projects, sometimes covering 3 to 4 cities in 2 or 3 days. And we talk about land in acres. Numbers are in lakhs and crores, very different. So as a reminder to myself, I'm just going to rattle a list of Indian cities I've traveled to. Hyderabad, Mumbai, Delhi, Gurgaon, Noida, Bangalore, Ahmedabad, Chennai, Calcutta, Pune, Jaipur, Chandigarh, and Amritsar. 13 cities. So I've been to all these 13 cities. But when I juxtapose to where I am from, Singapore, we only have one city. We don't have many, many cities, just one city. This is the only city we have, and not just that, we are also a country. We are 730 square kilometers. In fact, if you drive 30 minutes anyway, doesn't matter, it's north, south, east, west, you will hit a shoreline. That's how small we are. And no natural resources. So a city-state, which is also a country, think about the fact that utilities, power stations, parks, desalination plants, reservoirs, army camps, all of this has to be packed into this little island. So as a consequence, land is extremely scarce. And with so many competing needs, every square meter counts. You know, the folks in Singapore, the agencies, the planning agencies, almost need to be paranoid about land administration, so much so that you ensure there's a best use of space. And I think this elevates the importance and highlights the importance of geospatial, especially in the case of Singapore. Back to SLA's vision of limited land, unlimited space. We are the National Geospatial Agency. We develop, we support, we promote the adoption of geospatial data to support the Singapore Smart Nation strategy. And on that note, also very humbled and honored that Singapore was appointed as co-chair for UNWGIC Land Admin Expert Group. I've got my colleague, specifically Dr. Victor Khoo, who is a co-chairperson. I think a lot of things for us to learn from the experts here, but just want to share with you Singapore's story. And a few sectors, right? We talk about geo-powered transformation. I'm going to touch about a few sectors here. First of all, the public sector, social services sector, how geospatial can be an enabler for sustainability, private sector, and for the young. It's about mainstreaming. So technological advancements. How do we do it in Singapore? We do area photogrammetry from the sky, about a kilometer up, as well as ground LiDAR scanning, so it's a point cloud. And I think with this, what you get is 600 billion points of point cloud, 3 million panoramic images, about 5,500 kilometers of public street, all mapped out in a digital twin. And we think that this is an important baseline for high quality data, and hopefully this will lead to better information and decision making. But why do we need this? Well, in short, Singapore is very dense, very densely built, and more often than not, you find mixed-use developments. So in the slide that you see here, you have elements of a public housing with housing at the top. You have an MRT station or subway station at the bottom. You have airspace for the bus interchange. We are seeing a lot more mixed-use developments. How do we manage all these cadastral needs then? And I think with the digital twin, what you can do is that we are transforming city planning. Now, with all this digital twinning and 3D technology, what you can do is the planners, upstream planners, can think about wind flow, microclimate change, microclimate analysis, think about modeling, simulation, to the extent of even shadow analysis. We think this is an important step towards a smart nation. And the National 3D Mapping Initiative provides the foundation bedrock from which countless geospatial applications and derivative products can be built on. Tree mapping. Singapore is a garden city. We may say that Singapore is a city in a garden, whichever way you look at, a lot of trees in Singapore. This is a problem statement of National Parks Board. We work with them very closely. Previously, the folks on the ground has got to manually, physically be there to measure the girth of the tree, to check the health of the tree. And you can imagine it can be fairly dangerous, especially if you talk about tree-lined highways. So with a LiDAR scan and point cloud of, effectively, we have mapped the entire tree ecosystem. Going forward, what they need to do is to go online and see what is the changes, if there may be. And I think a consequence of that is that now you know different species of trees have different growth rates, different girth, different crown, different size. The next time when you're planning a park, it allows you to specifically see which species of trees will help for the particular park. And in geospatial analysis, this slide here, what we show is data-driven decision-making. I think the folks from the last session talk about decision makers. This is something that we want to paint to decision makers as well. If you have geospatial analysis, you have demographic data, demographic profile, overlay it over, and then you can be very targeted in the facilities that you build for your respective counties. Is it more of young families with young children and hence more childcare centers, or is it the other way around? What about a situation where Singapore faces aging population? Now, if you see the picture on your left, this is a barrier-free access. So what this means is that SLA has come up with an app, a map app actually, called OneMap. And within the OneMap app, something that we're working on is that you can choose a route or a route that is barrier-free. So if you're physically challenged, if you're young babies on prams, if you're moving heavy goods, the route will allow you to tell you which is the barrier-free, curb-free access. I think it makes for better, transportation. Now, on the right-hand side that you see, autonomous vehicles. Geospatial, precise GNSS is the bedrock of how AVs will work. And SLA is very proud to support this. This is what you see in the super parks at Gardens by the Bay. So not just going up, because we're so small, we go down as well. So mapping of subterranean space, digital underground is very important. The digital underground research work was done in 2017. It's to create a roadmap towards a reliable underground utility map. And to a certain extent, instead of cut and cover, and sometimes contractors have been known to cut the wrong cables or wrong pipes accidentally, that's not good. So this is a way of having an X-ray eyes, if you may, of augmented reality, going through underground without the need to physically excavate. And I think beyond that, we have heard about machine learning, you have heard about artificial intelligence. SLA is also working with artificial intelligence, specifically AI Singapore, to see whether can we utilize AI to highlight things like street signage, little curbs, road and roadside features, so that we can, instead of manually mapping this on the map, we can use this from an AI perspective. It'll be more efficient, more effective, Social services, I think it's about mainstreaming, telling people, raising awareness of what some geospatial technology can do. And in this slide, what you have, as I mentioned, one map. In fact, one map on this situation, geospatial mapping is important for social services. COVID. When COVID happened, what we did for SLA, for Singapore, is that we actually mapped out the various test centers, the various test kits vending machines, the various mask vending machines as well. So it's more effective. You find which is the one closest to your home. And one map actually powers over 100 Singapore government services through the One Service app. And this provides municipal services across a variety of domains. In fact, the World City Summit was held in Singapore in May this year, where mayors across the world fly to Singapore, and for the very first time, there was a presentation on geospatial to raise awareness. And I think that was a very well-received presentation. Mayors subsequently called us and said, you know what, I would like to try this. I would like to try this in their home country or hometown. This slide that you see here, My Responder app, if you get into an accident, imagine the anxiousness that you would if you call for the ambulance. How do you describe your precise location? Now, if you use this app and dial for help, it automatically geotags it. So there's no ambiguity about the location, and help can be rendered much faster. Another possible item that arrived from a very proactive seeding that we have done, we met a mayor in Singapore to raise awareness, and that's where she said, you know what, in her particular constituency, she can think about using this map a lot more. Think about social services, think about profiles of needy families. How does she map out all this on a particular map, analyze it geospatially, and be more effective in terms of rostering of teams? So it's a more targeted provision of services. And as a consequence of that, barrier-free access and inclusive employers. Now, if you're physically challenged, what do you think about mapping inclusive employers? And if you're physically challenged, you probably want to go to an inclusive employer closest to you. So these are the many different ways, downstream ways, that I think awareness is needed on the ground. Sustainability, something that we talk about a lot. Geospatial can be an enabler for sustainability. And in this slide that you see, the 3D solar potential map, Singapore has mapped out pretty much the solar potential. So it's not a case where if you have got a roof, put a solar panel. Because if you do that, the blind proliferation of solar paneling instead will increase the urban island heat effect. Digital twinning, urban heat as well, along the same lines. Flooding, we are 730 square kilometers. In fact, 30% of Singapore lies less than 5 meters above the mean sea level. So if this thing happens, we don't have much to play around with, right? Rising sea levels is an existential threat. So coming out with a digital twin allows us to develop a map for flood inundation, inland flooding, to do simulations. We spoke about the public sector, academia. We're working with both NTU, National Technological University on the left, National University of Singapore on the right, and the one on the right, you're talking about the possibility of using LiDAR scanning to better estimate carbon sinks. So from the perspective, we are also tinkering with the Ministry of Sustainability and Environment in Singapore to come up with a green map. All things green, EVs, solar potential, carbon sinks, recycling points. Can we map it on a single map so there's a single resource? Private sector. We want to position ourselves as a living lab, and this slide shows a last mile delivery. This Ninja Van is one of the largest kind of delivery company in Singapore. They had a problem statement. Using geospatial analysis, better mapping, more precise tools, they can solve their problem statements. We also work with Singapore Business Federation. It's an association of small and medium enterprises, really to be proactive, to showcase what geospatial can do. And in return, the chairman of SBF actually said, you know what, SLA, I've got my landscaping companies, I've got my maintenance companies, I've got my garbage companies. They would need technology like this to make their rostering of teams more effective. And I think something close to our heart, educating the young. Not too long ago, we actually met up with the second minister of education in Singapore. And the pitch to him was this: geospatial can bring education alive. And how we did this was that, talk about history, talk about geography. The kids nowadays are reading history from books, but history is not just a photograph with an accompanying paragraph that describes the photograph. History is all about events, events is about location. So how do we bring this alive? For example, in the Singapore scenario, imagine a situation where, for example, World War II. Imagine a teacher can tell the students, in day one, the battle was fought here. We lost how many troops? Day two, the troops retreated here. Day 3, day 4, day 5, and day 7. It brings history alive, and that's one. With location comes time series as well, and you can actually chart that through a time slider. The second thing that we pitched to the minister is this. Singapore is so small. We go through changes so quickly. Buildings get torn down. With augmented reality, why don't you think about a situation where you stand here, physically, you see a tall building, but if you use the augmented reality function from your phone, you can choose the map of Singapore in the year, say, 1950. And it's an old, low-rise building. So on this note, we are also working with National Heritage Board of Singapore with tons and archives of precious information to see how we can do this together. So the minister, upon hearing our presentation, got all pumped up, got his curriculum folks, right, to speak with our SLA folks, teachers from primary school, secondary school. The polytechnics met up, and they were very enthused about it. Then came this question from a teacher. She asked, why limit to just history and geography? SLA folks, you have a digital twin. If you have a digital twin, I can ask my children or students this question. Imagine you are flying a drone, you are standing here on level 2 of this building. I want you to fly the drone to a building 300 meters away to the 30th floor. What speed and angle should you fly your drone? That question came from a maths teacher. And that's precisely what we want to do. Create awareness, create a habitat, but not be prescriptive. And I think, Tim, you mentioned about prescriptive. Don't be prescriptive about it. Let the end users ideate themselves. So we're continuing this journey. And I think some of the sessions yesterday as well, the pitch to the minister is that when the children are playing with all this technology, unknowingly, they're learning geospatial stuff. And there is a career path for them. You may not be academically inclined, but you're good with tactile, good with coding. I mean, you have the likes of the logistics company, the Googles of the world. There is a career path for that. So just to very quickly sum it up, I'm going to have a short 2.5 minutes video, just as a...
A great city is one that is accessible, convenient, and safe. Not just a place to live, but a home where we can share life's special moments with the ones we love. Now, with geospatial technology and locational data in the mix, there are endless possibilities to build cities that are more efficient and livable for all. Whether we know it or not, most of us are already living geo-enabled lives. In Singapore, this is made possible by One Map, a comprehensive digital map containing data that makes day-to-day decisions a little easier. Looking for a new home? Search recently transacted property prices and nearby amenities, all on One Map. You can also assess public childcare centers and schools located within a 1 to 2 kilometer radius. Finding the perfect place to live, work, and play has never been easier. Are you a cycling enthusiast or driving to work? With detailed local data at your fingertips, your journey is safer, quicker, and greener. Skip the jam in your daily commute, or pick out the best park-connected network to explore the island on a bike. Find out if you're in a dengue cluster. And remember to spray insect repellents. A great city is the product of many hands working together. With geo-enabled services, it's now possible to improve your neighborhood anytime, anywhere. Report hygiene, safety, or maintenance issues and geotag your location. Geospatial technology already powers many aspects of city life. Now, it's time to let it empower you. Download One Map to experience geo-enabled living today. Available on Apple and the Android App Store.
So just summary slide, mainstreaming, seed early, be proactive, create stickiness, and demonstrate solutioning. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Colin. That was more than interesting, and I think we're starting to, at least from my perspective, starting to weave a story. So as we begin our discussion following our presentations, we can get into some of those specific details. So our third speaker today is Dev Batterjee. She is a data scientist, lots of experience in using data, but also the power of data science. And I was impressed in reading her bio that she doesn't have just one startup, she has more than one startup. I can't even imagine how difficult that process is, so that's quite impressive unto itself. But it's clear that she is able to use geospatial information, technology, and then the power of data science to advance the services that she provides. So Dev, if we could hear from you, that would be great. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. Well, am I audible? Great. Awesome. So, it was lovely to hear from Sergio about SDG Data Alliance, the kind of data collaborations we're talking about. And I went through your presentation on Singapore Land Authority, and it's really inspiring of what we can do in India. I don't have a presentation, unfortunately, so you have to bear me, going up and down and talking to you. I would really take this opportunity to really share my story. Well, first of all, it's lovely to be here in presence of the best geospatial minds of the industry, eminent data scientists, industry leaders, policy makers, thought leaders, and I have had a lovely last 2.5 days interacting with many of you. And as a matter of introduction, I am the CEO and founder of a data science startup called Numerate, and we are using GIS data in building sustainable and traceable marine ecosystems and profitable marine livelihoods. I am a data scientist by profession. I come from pure play data science, but introduced to the world of GIS in the last 10 years and fell in love with it. But I also wear a different hat. I am the FICCI Fish Tech chairperson, FICCI as in Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce. So I kind of dabble around in entrepreneurship, being a techie person, handling the technology of it, but also into a little bit of understanding how to really do the sectoral growth. The first few minutes of my talk, I'll talk about how we really bumped into the coastal community as a ecosystem for whom we are working with the grassroots communities, and the last bit I'll talk about how do we really see what really is needed to build the global village, as you're talking about, enabling the global village, and for us, it's the coastal community. So back in 2018, the team was working on coastal flood modeling. It was a project granted by the European Space Agency. We won the grant. We were working on the risk modeling of coastal floods. And when you do a risk modeling of it, you do a geophysical modeling, as in how far the flood is extent, or how deep the water is. But you also do human capital risk modeling, as in who is affected, which is the livelihood we're talking about, how many lives impacted, how many lives lost, where in demography, which location. So what was becoming clearer and clearer is the economic section facing the brunt of climate change the most is the fishing community, and is the small-scale fishing community, and these are the coastal communities that we're talking about, remote in nature. And this was all desktop-based research back in the day, and we tried a lot to really validate our findings with some research that has been done about the demography, but there's none to be found. very, very underrepresented in the mainstream dialogue. So we took up our own way of really doing or talking to the communities and understanding. And we were a tiny startup back then, so it involved me and my colleagues and friends of friends and relatives, and even my mom to really, they were given a set of question papers to go and ask fishermen, and come back with findings. And we realized there are three main problems that the fishing communities or small-scale fisheries are facing. The first is the fact that we found that climate change is impacting their lives, which turned out to be true, because what climate change has done is really change their cyclical pattern of fishes that swim near the coast. And okay, for a matter of introduction for people who don't really know the term, small-scale fisheries are fishermen that fish within territorial waters with boat size less than 20 feet or less. So for them, they are spending more and more time out in the sea, getting exposed to more bad weather. Cyclonic conditions out in the sea has increased has doubled over the last few years, owing to climate change, and this is true for across the world. So what happens when they spend more and more time on the sea is not only risk to their lives, but also the fact is 80% of their cost is fuel. So they're not only is creating a dent in their own pocket, but they're burning more, more diesel, so more carbon emissions out in the sea, right? The second thing that came might not be climate change related, but it's more about the fact that geographic inequity, as the fact that the urban planning that we see doesn't exist there, so they have to travel really 50 kilometers to sell the fish or buying any kind of fisheries equipment. So market linkages are completely missing. And the third is the fact that a culmination of all these two is they do not have representation in the mainstream finance and insurance. So we are talking about the step before underwriting, collection of data, understanding this demography so that some kind of financial instruments can be built for them. So as you can understand, the problems were large and wide, and it was societal in nature, environmental in nature, policy-level decisions, and we were a tiny fledgling of a startup back then, and we realized what we can do best is basically we are techies, we analyze GIS data, and so where we started is building a tool that will help them understand the immediate seafront or immediate marine ecosystem or the weather or the marine conditions in their own environment better. That was the birth of our app called N8 OFish. N8 is what we fondly call a startup numerate. It is available in Play Store. But for that, we really had to spend lengths of time with the coastal communities understanding what are they doing in the traditional ways and how are they not being able to, how their traditional knowledge is not being able to keep at par with the changing climate. And there were various different parameters that they shared with us, saying that this is all we need to really, navigate better in the sea, and that included ocean currents, tidal fronts, sea flow depth, that included wind direction, wind speed, potential fishing zones, algae blooms, hyperlocal weather data out in the coast, and these are near real time, and we refresh the data every 4 hours, and this is what the app provides to them. But also the crucial part of working with communities, and when you're giving a very, think about it, we are analyzing coastal or ocean observation data and giving them a marine and weather advisory, which are very technical in nature. But you're expecting a fishing community to really understand it. So you have to really model it in a way that communities can use it and does not need too much of technical knowledge. I'll talk about it in the lessons learned. When we were developing the app, what also happened in parallel in 2019 is that we got selected by the United Nations World Food Program. That gave us a good platform to really validate the fact that the work that we are doing is not just India-focused. It's actually, it's a problem for 67 countries across the globe, which has large coastal ecosystem, which large population of small-scale fisheries. So overall, we call it small-scale fishermen or small-scale fishing community. But the impact is very large. 80% of fisheries around the world are small-scale. They employ almost 25 times more local youths. They fish within territorial waters, do not use invasive means of fishing, so largely sustainable means of fishing. And 76% of the workforce is fisherwomen. So there's a large women-driven, society there. So that got us interested, and also the sheer numbers. We're a for-profit company, so of course, we had to have the numbers, needed to understand the numbers there, the market sizing there. In India alone, it's 4 million marine fisher folks, 2 million marine fisher women. Around the world is 800 million small-scale fisheries. 3 billion people depend on seafood as a source of life, directly and indirectly source of livelihood. So it's large numbers in play. We got selected by the World Food Program, and very interestingly, World Food Program has been running this accelerator. I think many of you will be familiar to this, where they look for technology company who is addressing SDG 2, or the fight against hunger using technology resources. And we are the only ones in the last 4 years of the program being conducted who's talking about solving hunger with using food from the oceans. And it's admirable that the world is solving problems of hunger with food from the land, but think about it, there are large coastal population dependent on fish as their primary source of protein, and very cheap source of protein and livelihood. And 70% of our world is ocean. So I think it's high time that we really think about it and look at it with a new lens. So long story short, since then, 2022, we are working with fishing communities primarily around India. We have done few pilots outside India, but what we provide them is marine and weather advisory through our app, but we also provide market linkages and financial support. And the work that we do has helped them reduce the operating cost on an average by 45%, which means 45% less reduction of carbon emission out in the sea. The market linkages we provide helps them provide a higher sales margin, and we have been able to do very, very starting work on the financial enablement by providing group loans to fisherwomen. Apart from that, in the last 1 year, since we work with coastal ecosystem and sustainability is the core of what we do, we have also bumped across this additional source of livelihood generation, which is seaweed, where we are using GIS. GIS helps us in analyzing seaweed spots, analyzing managing seaweed sites across the coast. So that's where the application of geospatial intelligence that we derive. And seaweed is also very close to our heart as of now, because it holds a high promise for carbon sequestration, and it has a large industry application in food, feed, pharma, fuel, biofuel, biofertilizer, talk about it. And we are working with one more organization called Climate Crew, who has knowledge of growing seaweed. Apart from that, just a little bit mentioned, because we are working with marine ecosystems, we also work in their communications. So small-scale fisheries cannot afford a satellite phone. So we are currently doing pilots where we are trying to give them a low-cost satellite phone, that low-cost phone or low-cost communication method, I won't call it satellite phone, that they can use, and especially during cyclonic weather conditions. So that has been our work so far primarily, and few of the lessons learned that I would like to share here. And it is actually about geo-enabling the global village in the same theme. Because what we realize through our work is the fact that it is very important and crucial for us to understand the global commons, the global commonly shared resources. And when we work with such communities, and we are actually sitting in between a fisherman who is a supplier and a buyer who is a seafood buyer, it is very essential that we understand what problem we are solving, and there are various problems, right? So starting with what you're solving, second is for whom you're solving, third is by whom you're solving, as in who is accountable, and fourth is how. So I will share a little bit about all the 4 points that we have learned in our own way, in a hard way rather, is that, of course, what is for us is solving coastal resilience for these communities, addressing their geographic inequity, addressing or creating sustainable marine ecosystems. That was a what problem. By whom, or for whom rather, for whom is the small-scale fisheries, but it's very, very important to understand the demography that you're solving. So when you're talking about creating or enabling the last mile, I think yesterday our Honorable Prime Minister mentioned that you'll be enabling the last person standing in the last mile. So it's very important to really study the demography well, In our case, it was for us, we needed to understand, of course, India is a vast country and every state has a different language. So our app is available in 9 different languages across India. But fishermen are not that technically savvy, so we had to really understand the user design or the human-centric design of the app, which means understanding what kind of icons they relate to ocean currents or what kind of icons they relate to wind direction, wind speed. It's not necessarily what I do or what I relate. So we had to do those kinds of design thinking approach with the community and build the app with their participation so that, at the end of the day, if you're not doing that, adoption will be poor. And you'll spend a lot of money on customer acquisition cost and all of that. So for whom also meant the fact that the fishing community is very remote in nature. So you had to support offline map. But when you talk about offline map, it should not be very heavy in nature. It should be usable in any kind of a smartphone that they have. So all those design thinking has to be done when you are typically talking about solving for the global village, which are not necessarily urban customers. And the second thing is, of course, by whom, which is mostly people like us. But at the end of the day, if you want a community to adopt a certain solution, like we are talking about participatory GIS, right? We're talking about enriching our satellite maps by crowdsource information from the ground. All of that will only happen if the community is incentivized to really work. I mean, they see a profit there. Otherwise, they are basically running around fending for their daily needs. So you'll have to make sure that your dialogue is open, which includes them, which gives them the ownership, which makes them accountable for that solution. So it is very necessary that you define that narrative with them and have that communication running. And I get reminded about this phrase that the former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan used to use, that we are looking at problems without passports, as in climate change does not have any borders. So we definitely need a solution without passports, but the solution needs to be locally derived. It is also ties to the very recently, we are all going through the decisions made in COP26. When you talk about climate change, there is national determined contributions that we have chose as nations ourselves. And our Honorable Prime Minister have set some lofty goals for India. And but working towards there, what we are telling now, it is LDC for NDC. LDC stands for locally developed choices for national determined contribution, which means at the end of the day, there is a national dialogue, but you will have to build it up grassroots, which we are all talking about in the last 2.5 days over here. The grassroots enablement is important, and for them, enabling those communities to really work with you, give you the right kind of data, participate in your initiative is very important. So that was our by whom, the accountability bit. And last is the how. I will leave the audience with the thoughts that we have, or we found strategies that work for us. So there is the people, planet, profit, the triple bottom line that you have to really keep in mind when you work with communities. Of course, the people and planet is well understood. The profit is, of course, something that you'll have to derive from depending on the communities you're working with. But we like as a FICCI Fish Tech chairperson, I sometimes have to wear a different hat. I'm not economist, but it has been a learning on the job. So we realize there are a couple of normative gaps when it comes to policy thinking and in economic design. And these gaps are typically your gaps in policy, gaps in norms, gaps in institution compliance. So you have to keep in mind while you're designing these kind of community-based solutions. And in our case, what we always do is make sure that the solution is collaborative. And we are using existing data resources like an SDG Data Alliance. There are various data resources existing in various pockets. In India, there are various surveys, be it census of India or other surveys that are already using data, how to kind of incorporate it and not kind of duplicate the task. And the third point is the fact that the policy cannot be centralized. You cannot have a centralized narrative in building this kind of community-based work or grassroots-based development. Your center can participate in negotiating the last deal, but the participation should come from the grassroots. So involve your communities on it. So that's been my study so far, and I think that's all from my side. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Well, it's a little bit of a challenge to tie these together because we really just heard three very different examples and applications of digital transformation and the technological development. But I'm going to try to do something to bring those together. And while I'm doing that, I want you to be thinking about questions that you might have for any one of the speakers or even for all of the speakers if it's a common question. The way I'd like to manage this is that we have lots of microphones throughout the room, so you have to be at a microphone. And I would like you to ask a question instead of making statements. If you could just ask a question, keep it brief, and that would help us give everyone an opportunity to ask their questions. So we started off with Sergio, and in this case, we're really talking about development, opportunities for development. And this is a situation where you're taking two existing programs within the United Nations, the UNWGIC, UNIGIF, the Country Level Action Plan construct, and you're also taking the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and you're trying to use or develop both capabilities to support one another at the end of the day. And so when you look at that, that's a build it up from the bottom. You're dealing with basic methodologies, you're dealing with applications, you're dealing with all the different tenets of the IGIF itself in terms of the 9 strategic pathways. So I see that as an example of that development process. Then you move over to Singapore and you look at Colin's work and wow, what a highly integrated example of all the things that are possible if you have the data, if you have the technology, if you have all of these basic components. And when I think about the countries that are being served at the moment through the SDG Data Alliance, and then I look to the future for them in terms of what's happening in Singapore, that's wow, that's quite an opportunity to look forward to. And then you look at Dev's part in using basically a new discipline of data science and looking at the existence of data and solving specific problems, specific challenges, understanding the nature of a particular problem or a particular objective or goal, and then working through to getting to that solution. So how do we get from the building of the process to a highly integrated, unbelievable environment within Singapore and continuing that process of solving real-world problems? Would you like to just take a stab at a general question like that? Could I start with you, Sergio?
Absolutely, Tim, and thank you for that. From our perspective, it's a lot about partnerships, right? Bringing the different stakeholders together, right? The UN Sustainable Development Goals and the goals themselves are a framework on how we're going to advance sustainable development, right? 193 member states came together to build these in years of work. But as I mentioned earlier, when you start to look at the baseline of what are we doing, where are we going, where did we come from, right? And also the importance of geospatial data, it really starts to paint a real picture. And we saw Colin, and I thought that the presentation and the work that his team is doing in Singapore is really something that when we look at the work in the 20 governments that we showcased in the video that we're working with, it's kind of what we aspire, to actually, inspire these government leaders to see and say, hey, look, here is not only a future where technology is really embedded in how do you improve someone's life, but also how you can make better decisions. And as I said, from that perspective, we're starting at the basic elements of providing resources to governments, bringing these technology solutions, looking at examples that actually work, so there is a goal to work backwards from. And also, which is really important, is public-private partnerships, right? Bringing in industry, private sector, the innovation, because what is and how and what was done in Singapore doesn't apply to Malawi, doesn't apply to Chile, right? Doesn't apply to Guatemala, because we also have to be conscious of what are the solutions and opportunities locally on the ground, right? So that makes us a little bit more daunting, a little bit more sort of, a lot more work, but a lot of what we like to do with the foundation and with the SDG Data Alliance is to sort of not just multilateralism as a perspective of how we're looking at the big picture, but also multi-stakeholder. We're making sure that there's civil society, private sector, NGOs, and the government involved in the conversation, so we start to build sort of a framework of what the GGIM has been building and building on top to bring in the different innovators. So the SDG Data Alliance is really that sort of engagement mechanism that brings in the different stakeholders that normally the UN would not be sort of housing, if you will, or promoting. That's where public foundation. So to us, again, it's a little bit of bringing all these different stakeholders. It's a bit of different ingredients, but we're just, I think that's, again, from our lens, to your question, that's how we have been advancing the goals, how we've been advancing geospatial data, and also helping advance governments' role in how they could use these technologies.
Well, thanks, and I think that's really good. Now, Colin, I'm one of Sergio's countries. I want what you have. I want that. How do I do it? How do I get there? What do I have to do? Where do I go? Where do I begin? How do I do this?
Well, I think back to your first question, I think the process wasn't easy. I think it takes a lot of partnerships, a lot of working together, a lot of buy-ins, both for the public sector and private sector. But I think what's most important, you need to start with a vision. I think once you have a vision and you work backwards, then you see how you can get the buy-ins from the different sectors. But I think if you talk about, from a less developed society or country to reach a particular status, and I think what I would say is that let's look at the existing issues and the problems, and let's look at, what are the low-hanging fruits, if there may be, and then think about startup packages. Maybe it's a 1 to 10, for example. You can't have everything at the same time. We didn't go through the process as well. It's not a one-stop-fits-all. It's a due process of inkling our way, pushing boundaries, getting the right buy-in from the right person sometimes to share the story. And I think if you go that way, you can show progress. And what I've said in the presentations a lot of times, when there is a need and a want from the ground, that message is much, much stronger than an instruction from the top. And if you have realized throughout my presentation, it's all about being proactive, it's all about seeding. It's not a case where I feel that this is good for you, but I create the habitat. I show you what the habitat is. You guys on the ground, the businesses, the students, the small and medium enterprises, the large corporations, they realize that there is such a platform, there's such a tool, and they begin to ideate. And then it's them who say, you know what, Colin, SLA, I need this. And I think there was an earlier panelist that mentioned, you think about the Google Maps, you think about traveling, you think about tourism, the maneuvering, the navigation, geospatial underpins all that. I think a very quick question, a clear question is that if geospatial didn't exist, you will not enjoy this, nor this, nor this. I think that awareness is not so apparent in the public sector in general.
Well, thanks. And Dev, how do you help make this happen? What part do you play? How do you provide a solution to a given aspect of something that's going to help them connect those dots?
Tim, we actually play a kind of a role sitting in the middle, educating even the policymakers. In a country like India, fisheries it's largely neglected. So even people sitting in Delhi who are making policies, they cannot. It's very difficult for them to understand what a fisherman in the pockets of Sindhudurg in Maharashtra is facing. So it's both ways. It goes both ways, where we represent them to people in Delhi or people making decisions at the higher level, and we also where we educate the fishermen, saying that you have to fish sustainably, and this is for your better future. So leading by example, as Colin was saying, happens in both the places. And since we are a technology company, it's easy for us to really demonstrate them that what technology can do, but in a way that they understand. So even within the community, there are various factions, not that in a fishing community everybody talks the same language. So you'll have to understand deep down study of your customer is very, very important, and knowing what language to speak. And then you can get buy-in from individual sector, and then you realize, okay, for a government in India, they are pressed to monitor where all they're going for fishing. So for them, you'll have to present that aspect of the story, and how your technology is will help that, and will help build sustainable oceans, sustainable fishing methods. For a fisherman, he is of course worried about that in his daily catch. So you have to make sure that tell him that if you're using sustainable gears, that's not going to lessen his catch. It's going to give them a better future. So lot of communication dialogues, the right people, the right trust building with community is very important, and building something that they're easy to understand and they're not having difficulties to really face. So yeah,
It's a lot of work.
it's a lot of work.
Did you want to make a point? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just, something that, and I was looking at the theme, just to remind everyone, right? The theme of today's summit is geo-enabling the global village, right? No one should be left behind. And a lot of, what is being discussed here, which I think is really exciting and I think needs to be really pointed out, is the integrated, right, geospatial information to support development, right? Sustainable development, entrepreneurship, government, right? For the well-being of societies, address environmental and climate changes, embrace digital transformation and technology development to catalyze a vibrant economy. So just wanted to kind of bring us back to the center here, because I thought that from an entrepreneurial perspective, multi-stakeholder, multilateralism to government and listening, right? Because I thought that one of the two things are from innovation to listening and integrated, right? Integrated geospatial, because geospatial is out there, as you said. Without that, we wouldn't be on our phones, we wouldn't be able to communicate, we wouldn't have so many of the luxuries that we have, right? But then we could integrate it and actually put it to work so that entrepreneurs can build the future. I just thought that was really, as I'm sitting here, little pieces that really just want to make sure that everyone here kind of makes that connection of the importance of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, thanks for that. Go ahead.
And if I could add, it's about platforms of communication as well. We are this geospatial folks, but we are just a minority amongst the working population or different sectors outside. What are the different conduits? What are the different platforms that we can put the message across? Every little platform that is available, we should shout that, and we should be the ambassadors of geospatial, because rightfully speaking, there's a lot of benefits that the end users, the consumers, the public, the citizens of the world can actually benefit from some of this geospatial technology.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just listening to Sergey, and I wanted to share that, our one of the happiest moments of our working with the communities is that we once got a call. So we provide the marine and weather advisories, but we once got a call from a fisherman asking us to give us a map of where the hardware shops for fixing boats are. He basically called us and said that, where is the nearest, because my boat has crashed, where do I go? Then I was giving him a number, and he said, why don't you add it as a map to your app? And it's like, okay, wow. That's, if the user really understands the solution, then you know that you have actually got the buy-in.
Yeah, exactly. All right, it's time for your opportunity to say a few things, ask a few questions. So do we have questions from the floor? We have one over here. So there's a microphone there, please, and go ahead and ask your question.
I think I got a question.
Can you hear me? Yeah,
there,
okay.
There we go.
Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Thank you.
Dr. Jamra from Ghana. And I like the Singapore experience, very impressive. enough. But I wanted to know whether they face some challenges with regard to the landowners. In the first foremost, who are the owners of the land in Singapore? Is it the customary or is it for the government?
Talking about landowners?
The owners of the land in Singapore. Is it the government or the customary people?
Well, from the Singapore perspective, all land belongs to the Singapore government unless it's been sold before on a freehold basis, then it's perpetually yours. But we also have cases of leasehold, 99 years, which means at the end of the 99 years, it comes back to the state. That's how it fundamentally works. And I think, just to add on, the reason for that is that we're a very small place. We turned independent in 1965. In fact, the next year, in 1966, the Land Acquisition Act was started because it is important for the government to take some of this land for infrastructure works. That's how you get public housing. That's how you get the MRT train lines. If that Land Acquisition Act didn't happen in 1966, a lot of land will be in private land lots. We may not have a public infrastructure development situation.
Yeah, in this case, how would you advise countries with land acquisition system, like ownership? We have the customary. For instance, Ghana, about 80% land belongs to the customary authorities, and only 20 belongs to the state. And if you want to, go into what you are doing, what will be your advice?
That's a very big question, actually, to the politicians. But I think a lot of buy-in needs to be done. A lot of education needs to be done. And I think you need to corral the masses on the ground, the people on the ground who will benefit if there's a change in policy. Because if a situation, and if the land is limited and it's 80% that's privately owned, you will find that you can't do a lot of infrastructure developments that will benefit the general population. So I would say, in short, to your question, a lot of convincing, a lot of buying, getting the private landlords together to see what are the trade-offs available.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. Yes.
Okay, my name is Dieter Fritsch from Germany, and I'm really expressed about the excellent infrastructure of Singapore. The question is, how do you maintain the updates of your infrastructure? Just an example, in Germany, we have now a huge problem. We have retaxation of the real estate sector, and 37 million parcels have to be declared, and the people are not able to do so. So they just gave 4 months' time to make the redeclaration, and now we have, the deadline is end of October, and so far we have now 12th of October. About 7 million people have submitted their declaration, and all the others cannot do it because of the missing knowledge. So how do you maintain training and updating of your excellent infrastructure in Singapore?
Okay.
Just to get a question correct, you're asking about the updating of the geospatial infrastructure?
Right.
Not easy. In fact, one of the issues we struggle with is the recency of the data. And it's a balancing act. The more accurate data you need, the more money you're going to pump in, the less frequent you can do. So in the slides that I presented, how we have done it is that 2 prongs, right? You fly a plane from 1 km up, takes the area photogrammetry, and then LiDAR point cloud from the ground, and that takes very detailed information. Can we do this every year? We can't. In fact, we only do this every 5 years. Then comes the problem. Singapore progresses so fast, not just in Singapore, in many cities, in many societies, progress so fast. How do we get recency? It's a perennial question, something we're still thinking about, but we're exploring ways to see whether there's any other way of doing it. Of course, you may have your satellites from 35,000 kilometers up, but it will not be accurate. At the same time, there's also talk about drone technology. But being drone technology in a very landlocked Singapore, you can't possibly fly drones everywhere. And the issue we face in Singapore is cloud cover. So a short kind of answer to your question, not an easy thing, something that we're still exploring, but hopefully we can get it a bit more recent than the 5 years that we're talking about.
Okay. And I guess, what I would add to that is that if you are a much larger country with far less resources, you have to stage your development and your maintenance over time. We have one over here, please.
Right. Good afternoon. This is Stephen from Andhra University, Andhra Pradesh. So yeah, Colin, I'm so glad to hear your presentation regarding Singapore. And you used the term like awareness, right? So awareness is the like a key factor for the title that we had kept for this conference. Like one should not be left behind, right? So like I just had a small question regarding like if a person is an illiterate, so how could you bring this geospatial to him? Like how he can use that? Like ma'am has told regarding the fisherman's, like a questionnaire section has been like essayed and answers have been gathered. Like if this is the case for a illiterate, so how could you like bring this geospatial technology to that illiterate persons?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
My personal thoughts are this. If you're illiterate, you may not be able to read certain things, but if there are any fundamental technology or certain platforms that you can engage the person, you will find that it's very interesting. A case in point, the 60, 70, or 80-year-olds in Singapore, a lot of them are not really literate, right? They don't read English. But when Pokemon Go, that game, came about, you thought it would just be the 30, 40-year-olds that are playing. But no, it's that 70-year-olds, 60-year-olds, what we call in Singapore aunties and uncles, that's going around doing on their phones because it is something that resonates with them. So my point to your question is that if there is a platform that you think you can engage and it resonates, gamify it, get traction, and perhaps, even if you're illiterate, you can play it, you can understand that it helps you.
Like so, you mean it's like a game?
Whichever way that you think is important, yeah.
Right.
Whichever,
also,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So let me go to your question to Sergio, because I think, this question applies to all of us. Do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, no, I think from our perspective is really, building capacity and as I said before, is identifying sort of the cultural elements on the ground and the stakeholders, right? I think a lot of the time we forget that, we're pushing information down, but it really should be bottom up and identify what are the things, if it's Pokemon or what is it that people are actually doing and go with their flow to help gather the information.
Yeah, thanks. And Dev, have you had experience with this?
I would like to share my experience in that. As I said, working with communities who are not really technical savvy, there is a big aspect of digital literacy, which we do. So any such communities will have to go and educate them about the app in their own language. You'll have to find people whom they trust, because all communities won't really trust me. I'm an outsider to them. You'll have to have those connections. But as Colin mentioned, gamification is very important. So whenever you're talking about the app, you can't give them descriptive videos. So we create videos in different languages, in 9 different languages, and those videos are interesting for them to understand, okay, they are talking about fishing, and you're being able to reduce the cost of fuel. Make it in a way is interactive, is gamified. You're seeing more pictures than actually, dialogues there, which will keep them engaged. So a couple of things you have to keep in mind when working with the last mile customers.
Thank you.
Yeah, one more, please.
We'll hold that question, please, to give others a chance to say something. Let's go over here to number 5, please.
Maybe I'll just say it here. Okay. Good afternoon to all of you. This session is about the well-being of society. I was just thinking about whether we've been able to quantify those, because of 3 examples here. We're talking Sustainable Development Goals. There are targets, indicators. So in all these examples that you cited, any quantification process has been done, which shows from the geo locations how things have got better on the ground by these technologies. Second is specific to Colin, when he mentioned, see, when we take up these kind of technologies, normally it's in the long term. We keep saying something will happen in 5 years, 10 years. Your statement about the low-hanging fruits was interesting. So I would like you to be specific about what were those low-hanging fruits which your government was able to pass on to society, because that would make it replicable. Thanks.
Hello. Testing. I'll answer your second question first. My personal take, low-hanging fruits, if you ask me, is to seed early, the young. the children. We're not talking about even the tertiary students. Really go young and try to educate them in the sense that what geospatial can be and how they can leverage on geospatial. And the reason being, once you start young and the catchment is much larger. If you talk about children and education, if you can get their buy-in, you're talking about thousands of students. And this is batch after batch after batch after batch. And if you get the buy-in from the students when they are playing with something that exposes them to geospatial technology, if you are parents of school-going children, you may be keen to find out what is your son or your daughter playing about? What is this thing that I've never encountered in my education before? And that gets a very positive kind of a second buy-in, if I may put it from the parents' point of view. So it may not be a low-hanging fruit per se, but it's something that I think is low-hanging if you seed early, if you seed correctly, because once you seed this correctly, there'll be generations of people who are more equipped and more well-versed with geospatial technology. Case in point, SLA recently had a bring your kids to work, to office, to get some interaction. And our geospatial folks, my colleagues who were sitting down there, obviously in the office we have game stations, right? We have the station A, station B, station C, and station C was Minecraft. Minecraft with Marina Bay Sands, Singapore icons embedded. We actually had 2 colleagues stationed there to explain. But when the kids came, you know what? Don't bother. They went there, they did their own stuff, and they're meddling around, fussing around, playing with the Minecraft, Singapore version of Minecraft. And that's my point. Choose the platform that resonates with them. They will feel it invariably when they're playing, they're designing things geospatially. Then how do you contextualize and embed into the curriculum and education system? Can I ask you to repeat your first question again? Sorry.
Well, let me go. He was talking about the SDGs, so let me come to Sergio on that if I can, because you've got to focus on SDG 10, for example, and so maybe you could just say something about how that fits into this process.
Well, when we decided about a year ago really to focus on the partnership with Kellogg's Foundation, and one of the goals that we were going to focus on is SDG 10 on inequalities, reduced inequalities, because not only did that apply where we were coming out of the pandemic, but also just a prevalent problem across the world, and something that we believe that with geospatial data we can start to gather and collect this information in order to better understand what reduced inequalities means, not only just actually talk about how we can solve the problem, but also understand the information, and again understand it at a super hyper local level, so we can understand where education is missing, where we could provide education. Because again, at the end of the day, when we look at geospatial and we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, it's also about the next generation. But as you talked about the schools, and it's about educating and be able to have these resources. And capacity building isn't just about capacity building for today, but also for tomorrow. And if we're not educating and creating that pipeline of how the next generation is going to embrace this information, this technology, then we're only building for ourselves. And so to us, Sustainable Development Goals has many, sort of ways. And when you look at SDG 10, it hits all the other goals, right, from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and just all the way across to 17 partnerships. So, for us, the goals is really the centerpiece with geospatial, is really the mechanism.
Thanks. All right, another question? Oh, yes, here we are. Number 2.
That mic on. He's trying to give you a break. It's coming out.
Lorenzo De Simone from FAO. We are concerned with supporting countries in building technical capacity in actually producing their geospatial data, mostly crop data, land cover data in general. And on top of this, of course, the aim is to build applications. Now, when I saw the Singapore app, of course, it's lovely, and I'm in love with applications which have geointelligence. My question is regarding the quality of the input data, so the accuracy of those maps. We struggle a lot in ensuring that maps are of high accuracy because you need more training and calibration and validation data. I was wondering what's the process in maintaining such an app beside the architectural side? How can we ensure that the quality of that data is somehow controlled and it's stable over time so that the services that come to the user, then they are, kind of precise? Thanks.
Thanks. This is a very technical question. As you can tell, I'm not a technical person. but my answer to your question is that's why I mentioned earlier, it's not an easy process. This was a journey that started 10 years ago, and along the way came issues about platform, came issues about data integrity, came issues about different sources of data. What is that fundamental solutioning, if I may put it that way, to cleanse data so much so that it talks to each other? Not an easy question to answer. I am afraid I can't answer you directly. You can refer to Dr. Victor Koo. But I think the other side issue that I can glean from your question is talent. And that's a real problem. We find that geospatial talent is far and few between. In fact, there are not many universities across the world that produces geospatial graduates. But why is this so? And I think it goes back to my fundamental point, because I think there's a lack of awareness. Because if you think about geospatial, there is only one career path, and there was a session panelists yesterday that there's only one particular career path. We cannot go in different splinter or tangent career paths. But I think that is not correct, and which is why we also mentioned that you need to seed early, allow geospatial to be sexified. Let's put it that way, and you get more traction in it. Not be geology, geography graduates, but in fact you can have midstream people from different. You are one classic example, right? I think we got another lady who's French, who was a previous panelist. She's a journalist, but she crossed over to geospatial. How do we get more of such folks with diversity of thought? Allows the base to be broadened and hence communicate more, raise awareness. So I didn't answer your question, but I will want to take your name and I'll ask Victor to answer your question. Thank you.
Any others have thoughts on this?
Data collection is always an ongoing exercise, and for us, just taking that question, we need field data collectors for collecting coastal data of ecosystem data. Data validation is very core to what we do. So you will need an army of people, and it's not an easy task. You need an army of people who is able to collect data and validate the app, validate your applications at every new places that you are providing satellite imagery for, and at various levels. So QA is essential. It's an ongoing activity.
Thank you. Sergio, go ahead.
Yeah, I think to kind of just package this and kind of obviously speak about the SDG Data Alliance is that, what we saw was, really the element of bringing all this innovation, all this different IP together, right? So it's not just the stakeholder, which is government, or the entrepreneur that has the solution. We all have parts of it, where we all have a piece of that solution. The private sector, right now we're seeing, everything happening, private sector very focused on ESGs, right? Environmental, social governance, right? We have the SDGs, the governments, we have the geospatial data, we have social initiatives that entrepreneurs are launching on a daily basis. Social entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs focused on creating solutions that are, will create economic development in their country, right? You have educational platforms. So, to us, again, when we look at, sort of more holistic, right, and understanding what are the solutions that are needed at each of the sort of, government regions, geographic regions, right, and then who are the stakeholders that could help us get there, right? So to me, when I start to think about how and what we're all doing here is really the most important piece is learning from each other, partnerships, right, and that alliance of shared best practices so that we could actually find the best solutions that are suited to, the opportunity of need.
Yeah, and clearly partnerships are such a critical component because you can't do it all yourself. You need others to be part of that process. Do we have one over here? Yes, please.
Yeah. Good morning, ma'am. My concern to you, ma'am. The thing is, GIS systems, data is very important to develop, to run these programs. You understand the value of data. I'm coming from a very small village. I want to share a story, then I will come to my point. Some of the agency come to just point out the GPS locations. So the villagers are not ready to, no, you cannot take my locations. What you are doing? So these kind of illiteracy they have. So you are the people who are great visions of this, and you know what is the importance of data and why they are taking the GPS locations and what could be the outcome. So don't you think that we should run a program from the ground level to make them understand what is the potentials of this data and what could be the beneficial for us? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
I think
even
I
ma'am,
heard.
sorry, even from government employees, they are not allowed to do this. No, you cannot do this kind of survey here. And it's that time I was there in my village, so it was horrible, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
No, I completely understand, and everything that we do is grassroots enabled. And see, as a company, we need to keep the government in the know, because as I was saying, there's an education that the government also needs to have. It's very it's difficult to expect for a government employee sitting in Delhi to understand the various factions of the society that is across India, and it's a large ecosystem. But coming to your point, we work with grassroots communities, and it has not been easy for us. Trust me, in 2018 when I was visiting Versova port in Mumbai, showing them I can give you what kind of various marine and weather advisories, the fishermen did not even feel like talking to me because I was an outsider. They were like, who are you to tell me about fisheries? So we had gone through that experience, but then I realized that you'll have to work with people that they trust. So every village or every fishing community, you'll have to find somebody they listen to. So you have to have the buy-in. So trust building with community is very important. And of course, they don't believe in government babus because they think that what are they gaining from being the data? They are not getting any benefit out of it. So that kind of communication education needs to happen. So you cannot just go and throw off the information on them. You have to really take the collective ideation, their problems, and then tell them this is what you have. And problems are different. I mean, the kind of dialogue we have to have with the Kerala fishing village is very different from a dialogue that we are having to have with the Maharashtra fishing village, very different from a dialogue that we are having to have in the Andhra fishing village. It's very different. We did a pilot in Philippines. That's again a different demography altogether. So studying and research and being able to communicate that with the community is the biggest is the biggest part. Technology, I'll say, is still comparatively easy, notwithstanding not taking away the marvels of technology, but social engineering is core at working with community.
Thank you, ma'am.
If I could add, in a Singapore context, I spoke about the small and medium enterprises. Some of them are mom and pops, obviously fairly resistant. And what we spoke to the Singapore Business Federation is that in the respective sectors, it could be maintenance, it could be landscaping, it could be F&B, find me that champion, which is that particular mom and pop company that's a bit more flexible, more willing to try things, and can be a strong advocate. If you manage to do this, you have one champion in each sector, it becomes a very strong advertisement, a very strong testimony and support for the particular sectors, and I think adoption will be much easier down the road.
Find your early adopters.
Early adopters, exactly right.
That's good advice.
Yeah, no, okay. I'm exactly as I was saying before. Is I think part of the most important part is understanding what are the pieces, the puzzle pieces that are already on the ground. Basically, as Colin said, who are the champions or who are championing different innovation that can be used? The government can provide a framework, but they can't be expected when it comes to, especially when impact is involved in helping advance society, everyone can play a role.
Right. Thank you. Other questions? Yes, please.
Hello. Yeah. This is for Ms. Devlina. Actually, it's a very innovative way of addressing SDG second goal to address the hunger. So I would like to know that because of this initiative, are you also collecting some data related with their availability, consumption of the food what are the outcomes? Whether financially, are they earning more? Are they eating better? Are you also capturing that data?
I wish, ma'am. I wish I could do that because, as you rightly said, there is no such mainstream study that has been done about this audience, about this community, and we are a small startup. We have limited resources, but we work with NGOs who are more connected to this ecosystem. So we do addressing financial viability because there is one part of our work that is financial connect. We do collect, their daily income pattern, spend pattern, their household level costs and all, but the data is still being collected. We have only been able to do group loans for fisherwomen, and we are working with other NGOs and other institutions to be able to collect the data because one thing is the data needs to be authenticated. Otherwise, you will just make garbage in, garbage out problem, right? So to answer your question, the work is still being done, and it's a difficult task for us now, but we believe we can, hopefully
definitely,
complete
because
this
is important as you are already having the application, and also one of the objective is to address the problem. So collecting the data will be helpful if at all, if I'm a person working in health field and my goal is to look at the, improving the nutritional status, how it is going to be helpful, what need to be done related with that, that may be definitely a value added and more useful for many people. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We have one over there, please.
Good afternoon. This is Rajshekhar from India's National Public Broadcaster. I have a couple of questions. One is from a gentleman from Singapore. That is, we have the geotechnology using for mapping models. For example, India is a fixed land. It's more than 32 square lakh kilometers. So it's a fixed land. Do we need to map again and again? What is the interval between each mapping? What is the need to map again and again? And the second question is, what is the ways you are disseminating information to, as you said, no one should be left behind. What are the ways you are disseminating the information to our general public? And the last question to Madam Bhattacharya is that we have in Hyderabad, INCOIC also is there. INCOIC is giving, we are publishing, announcing in All India Radio about the potential fishing grounds. What way it is different from your announcing the potential fishing grounds, how it is different, and what is the accuracy? Thank you.
Okay. I can go first and then, Colin can come in. So there wouldn't be an event where I'm not asked this question. So we started having dialogue with INCOIS back in 2018. And I think there's a still email chain running there. But sir, the basic problem for a geospatial startup in India or a space-based startup in India is that we as of 2019, 2020, we are seeing institutions like InSpace or which are enabling us to gather ISRO data. So in COIS, we would have loved to use what they have and built on the top of it. And they were interested in working with us in getting the data validated, because at the end of the day, validation from ground level is very important, but we could not, unfortunately, and so we had to do the entire thing from scratch. But the fact that I said we had to just give him potential fishing zone is not enough to a fisherman. You need also information about coastal currents, about changing your wave patterns, about algae blooms where they should not go. Just telling them where to go is not important, it's also telling them where not to go. And the various other parameters that came out of our entire discussions and entire staying in fishing village, understanding what they do traditionally and how to map that knowledge. So that's what we have added on the top of that. Till date, I'm not being able to use INCOIS data because the API is not open. But there is promise, because there are organizations like InSpace and ISPA who is working towards that. I'm hoping I can start using ISRO data more easily in the future. But coming to accuracy, the accuracy varies with monsoon. So in monsoon, you might see a 86% accuracy because of cloud cover. But we have other kind of arithmetic modeling to take care of that. But satellite data images 86%, but for a non-monsoon, it will be 92% where there's a dry, dry weather. And all this accuracy was tested by us with professional fishermen who are part of my team now, and marine biologists who had to take boat trips in various parts of the country, go and validate the points. So you can imagine the kind of validation you had to do apart from just pushing data in a web-based format, which you're expecting a fisherman to use and derive impact out of it. I hope I answered your question.
And Colin, you have the last word.
Yeah, I'll try to answer your second question because I cannot remember your first question. Okay,
First
the second
question is,
yeah.
India has fixed land of more than 32 square kilometers.
It's a methodology you're asking about?
Yeah, geographically. Do we need to mapping again and again? If so, what is the interval between each mapping? Why should we do it frequently?
Are there Indian experts here that can answer that question?
Okay.
I'm not so sure. Let me answer your second question first. I think your second question revolves around data sharing, if I'm not mistaken. Within the civil service, if it's secured data, national security is shared within the public service of planning committees, planning agencies, and so forth. I mentioned about one map, that is the open source, public facing data that we actually share. And in fact, one of the slides we mentioned about partnering with real estate agencies, for example. So the brokers, the real estate agents of Singapore actually use OneMap as a platform, and in return, they pump in hyper-local data. So that's meant to use commonly. And arising from COVID, you'll be surprised with people working from home, a lot of ground-up initiatives happen. Talk about bicycle cycling routes that otherwise would never have been charted. They use OneMap to map it out. Talk about something a bit of off the beaten track, which are the best ice cream locations from their perspective. So that's what I'm saying. Create the open source platform, let the folks ideate themselves, and then you'll find that you'll be surprised as to what the new creations or new inventions or new needs can come away with as a consequence of that. Your first question about the mapping of India being such a large country, I'm not too sure what is the best methodology involved. Perhaps the experts here can answer that question. Yeah.
All right, well, at this time, I think what we'll do is we'll close off the session with final comments from each of you. So, Sergio, if we could start with you for a closing comment.
Thank you, Tim. From our perspective, again, from Public Foundation, the SDG Data Alliance, I believe that when you start to look at what we've been talking about over the last hour and a half, I think we need to focus more on multilateralism, right? Sharing best practices from across borders, learning what other governments are doing, what other innovators are doing, right? Focus specifically on the creation of multi-stakeholder partnerships, right? So everybody has a voice and everybody has a seat. So we're able to learn and look across the aisle, look across the table, look across industry, right? And bring the different partnerships together, whether from the different sectors, segments, countries, regions, and unite them around a common goal. Whether it's SDG 7, SDG 15, SDG 17, SDG 4, SDG 1, whatever that is, and utilize technologies like geospatial so that we could advance and bridge the gap.
All right, that's great. I think that's a good idea.
Echo what Sergio has mentioned. I think closing words for me, fairly simple. If you notice the last slide that I have had, it's really about mainstreaming. Mainstream, be proactive, seed early, create stickiness. And if you do this right, it can be a very, very powerful platform if you do things early from the perspective. So that's my closing words. Then.
Okay, thank you. And Dev?
Right, so I think I can close off saying that, the work that we do has, somebody asked about impact of SDGs, so I'll take that point up from him. So it's very important to really, for us, we address SDG 2, of course, but we also address SDG 12, which is responsible consumption, because when you're working with food ecosystems, it is vital the fact that people like me who are fish eaters, we take the right decisions so that the fishermen are not to blame for just unsustainable means of fishing. And for doing all of this dialogue, you need to make sure your communications is open, you're being able to represent the data, the kind of technical know-how in a way that both the parties understand. So collaborations and partnerships and speaking their language of your various users is very important. And being able to drive people, planet, profit, of course, being able to drive the incentive of your both parties where they collaborate with you. And top it up with a purpose statement where everybody understands what's the broader goal that you're looking to achieve. So, being able to articulate your purpose on various demography of users that you're working with is very important. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And so at this time, I'd like to have you join with me in thanking our speakers for today. It was engaging, and I want to thank you for your participation. So thank you to our speakers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.